Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave yet again with you. Hello. Hope you're doing well. Yay, we're back. So we're talking about fostering enduring intimacy that captivates and retains an audience for your podcast. I hear a lot of podcasts about podcasting and social media for podcasting, all kinds of people out there talking about how to get a bigger audience, how to get new listeners. And we all want to grow. We all want our podcast to get bigger and better. We want our podcast to thrive and new people fall in love with it every episode and reach out to us and buy us a coffee or leave us a SpeakPipe message or reach out and send us an email or contact us on social media, whatever it is. It's so great when your audience gives back by listening to your show. That's an active part of giving, by the way. They're giving you their time, so never, ever, ever abuse that. Give them your best every time they show up to your podcast. But they give back to you in the form of donations or feedback or encouragement. And what a great feeling that is to see that in your inbox, to see money come into your account from a listener. That is such a great experience. And if you haven't experienced that yet, let me help you get that. Let me help you see what it feels like to get that interaction going between you and your audience. I think that's one thing you need to focus on. Even if you only have a few episodes and a handful of listeners, you can still build community right now. And it's probably the easiest time to do so with a small audience because you're dealing with a smaller group of people to build that authentic engagement and interaction with your audience. So we want to not just get more listeners, right? We also want to keep the listeners we have. And I don't hear a lot of gurus in podcasting talking about how to retain and keep your audience. We want them to stay. We don't want them just to come in and then leave, and then come in and leave. We don't want to be talking to like a parade. Imagine a parade and you're trying to do your podcast to this parade, and every 5 seconds there's a new audience. As it just keeps going by you, you're stationary and your audience is moving past. They're just catching little bits of what you're doing. It's kind of like radio, which is a thing that I don't enjoy. Radio is this passing medium that just goes by and you jump in here and there and catch little bits. That's why they do, weather and traffic on the nines, because they know you're not going to stick around and hear the next time they do it. So that's how they treat it. And we need to treat our podcast different than radio in the sense that our audience comes, we want them to stay. We want them to be a part of what we do and remain in our audience. We don't want them to leave. So how do we keep people from leaving our podcast? How do we keep our listenership growing so that we don't have 5 people start listening and 5 people leave? That's kind of a wash. We're really not growing our podcast. So we need to keep our podcast growing, keep our audience engaged, keep them sticking around and part of our community. So that's what I wanted to talk about today on the podcast. And I got 5 tips for you all around us fostering enduring intimacy that captivates and retains an audience here on the How to Podcast series. Are you ready? I'm ready. You're ready? Okay, let's go. Okay, so here are the 5 things, just as a brief summary before we jump in, what we're going to talk about today. The 5 things that we need to do to foster that intimacy and keep our listeners sticking around. We need authenticity. We need to be prepared. We need to embrace discovery. We also need to enhance ourselves as podcasters, and we need to edit ruthlessly when we do our podcast. Those are the 5 areas. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Number 1, authenticity. You hear this word a lot in podcasting that we need to be authentic. We need to provide authenticity with our audience. It's something that you're going to hear quite often and see it in books and other podcasts. You'll hear about it here on this show as well. Authenticity is super important for us as podcasters as we come to the mic on a regular basis, giving to our audience. And it's basically that we need to strive to be genuine. We need to have integrity. We need to be the same people on the outside that we are on the inside. When we're on the mic, when we're off the mic, when we're in public and when we're recording in our basement by ourselves, the same person that we present to the world. We want to be that person. We don't want to be so fake and salesy and not real. And if somebody met us in public, they're like, you don't sound anything like your podcast. You're not what I expected. We want to be the same person that we put through this microphone and comes out of these earphones. We want to be that person. So we got to avoid any attempt to win over listeners by gaming the system, by being fake. All of that stuff needs to be put aside. Authenticity resonates deeply and invites engagement from your audience. And I hope you're feeling that with the How to Podcast series, is that I'm trying to be and demonstrate authenticity in what I do. This is why I want you to start a podcast. I am really on your side to see you grow, start your show, and be there as a support for you in whatever you need, without judgment, as a coach, helping you along and giving you some ideas to help your podcast be more successful. That's the whole reason why I'm doing this. I don't have a program. I don't have something to sell. I don't have a book. I have nothing to sell you except on the idea that you can do this. That's what I'm selling for my podcast, that you can do this. You got what it takes, and no one should stand in your way. You can do this. You can be a podcaster. Being authentic, it's the cornerstone of connection. It's something that you need to develop if you don't have this as a main focus for yourself or your podcast. Your cornerstone, everything is built on that cornerstone. And a lot of people don't give it as much attention as they should. So I'm asking you to be more authentic, demonstrate authenticity, and show up in a real and authentic way as a podcaster. That's number one. Number two is preparation. I hear a lot of podcasters in the space that celebrate spontaneity, the idea that I'm just going to hit record and whatever comes out of my mouth is gold. I don't need to edit. And they proudly wave the flag of, well, it's all live. It's a stream that we turn into a podcast. And they just leave all of the junk in there that we could easily remove and honor the listener that's listening. Preparation is really important. Coming to the mic with no idea what your next word is going to be is probably not the most engaging form of content for your audience. In the long run, you might get people to come for a few episodes, but after a while they grow tired of your unplanned rants and squirrel moments where you go totally off script, off of your topic completely, and start talking about something that means nothing to anyone. And your audience is waiting, tapping their toes, crossing their arms for you to come back to the topic that we all showed up for. Because right now you've taken us off the tour and we're not sure if you're ever coming back. Be prepared. Your audience can sense a prepared podcast. It's essential. You need to respect your audience, their investment in you by delivering your best. You need to carefully plan out your story arcs, your questions, and your wording and how you're presenting your thoughts so you have a beginning, middle, and end to the points that you talk about and your podcast in general. We want to go somewhere, and you want to lead your listener through the content. Don't just hit the mic and hope for the best. Be prepared when you step up for your next episode. Put in the time. Your audience will thank you for it, and it'll keep them from leaving your podcast. Retain your listeners. Be prepared on your next episode. Number 3 is all around embracing discovery. You can do something really unique as a podcaster that really not very many other media or content creators can do. You can invite your audience into your thought process. You can engage them by revealing your journey, allowing for unexpected turns and insight. You can balance your preparation with flexibility to foster this genuine exploration together. You get to do the podcast with your listener in mind and bring in elements of your audience into what you're doing. So embrace the discovery idea of the podcast, of you building your podcast, of each episode. There's something magical happening in your show. And the more you can bring your audience into that process, the more you can engage them and embrace them as you discover your next topic, your growth of your show, all of the things you're learning, bring your audience in and allow them to be part of that. It's a great part of being a podcaster. The next one is to enhance yourself. Going back to how we show up as a podcaster, we don't want to come off as fake, as a character of ourselves, where we're making up something fake that was not the really true self, who we are. We want to be all those things to our audience. And we really need to be our true self. But we also need to realize that as a podcaster, we are a performer. We are going to step it up a notch from what you might meet us in public and who we are day to day. Especially for people like myself, introverts, we really got to work hard to get out of our head, get out of our self-evaluation, our default settings, and present ourselves in a light that pushes us to be a little bit uneasy and a little uncomfortable, but a little bit more than what we would normally be. So if we are a really monotone person, we don't have a lot of highs, we don't have a lot of lows, our heart rate is really normal, average, pretty calm. As a podcaster, that comes through the microphone. So I'm challenging you, if you're a very monotone, kind of average, boring type person, and I'm not meaning that in a bad way, I'm just saying that we really don't go crazy. If you took me to a sporting event, I like hockey, I'm in Canada, or take me to a concert, I'm a musician. It frustrates my wife when she takes me to any events like that because the crowd can be going wild, and I'll smile, I'll do the polite golf clap, which I'm doing right now, which you can't hear because that's what I do. I don't have a lot of highs where I'm like going crazy, doing what all the other fans are doing. I like to just be there and be a part of it, but I'm not like a boisterous person. I'm not somebody that you would see me from across the room and go, that guy's crazy. You wouldn't see that in me if you met me in public. But we need to take who we are and just amp it up just a little bit more than what we would demonstrate in our comfort zone. So pick your comfort zone and go up a couple notches from who you are when you feel most at ease. And present that in your next episode and see how that feels. Does it feel good? Does it feel better? You decide. But we need to elevate our presentation just a little bit more than what we would do day to day around the kitchen table, in the office, with the kids, a little bit more. When the recording starts, we need to shed the rules and simply shine. Your podcast persona, again, it's not fake, but your podcast persona should be refined more and a more compelling version of you. Be a little more sharp, be a little bit more witty, be a little more engaging than maybe you might be on your own default settings. To the opposite, if you are like super extroverted, woohoo, go crazy, go life of the party, you might want to dial it back just a little bit so that you're not overbearing, you're not talking over your guests, you're not hogging the spotlight. You might want to just think about how you present yourself in your podcast. Again, I'm not here to judge you, but I'm just saying, look at who you are when the microphone is off and there's no podcasting going on. That person, do you need to go up a couple notches or do you need to come down a couple notches in your podcast? Play with it, listen back, get feedback, and you decide what works best for you. But I think all of us could do better by enhancing who we are when we come to the microphone. Be a little bit more or a little bit less, but be a little different than who you are every single day. And lastly, we need to edit ruthlessly. Now, I mentioned that some podcasters think that they don't need to edit. Could be because they're saving money. Could be because they don't have the skills or talents or abilities to do editing. Could be that they're just flat out lazy. Because what I've noticed when people brag about not editing their podcast, those are the people who really need to edit their podcast. Unfortunately, because they are all over the place and they say, oh, I'm just going to leave that in there. Got to be real. Da, 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 da. And I, as a listener, I'm going, no, you didn't need to leave that in there at all. That was really a waste of my time as a listener. Editing is paramount. It refines your content. It ensures that it feels natural and cohesive. You can trim out your distraction. You can refine your jokes and eliminate some of your verbal tics. Some of those things that you say often, which I say lots of things often. You know, you've heard my show. You know exactly. You could probably give me a list right now of everything that I say that make you go, oh, they did it again. Oh, there it is again. There's another one. So you know better than I do of what my verbal tics are because you're listening to this. And thank you for listening, by the way. Editing isn't deceitful. It's a service to your audience. If you could watch me as I'm editing and recording this right now, you would see that I've gone back, I've cut, I've moved, I've changed some things, I've taken out a few things that I said where I got into it, one thought and went, nah, that doesn't work. Delete, cut, redo. I'm doing it kind of on the fly while I'm recording this for you right now. Editing is your friend. It's not your enemy. And it's not something to rejoice about that you don't do any editing and you're proud of it. Unless you're perfect, which I have never met a perfect person, so you might be the first. Hi, perfect person. I'd love to meet you. None of us are perfect. So it's not like you're lying to your audience that you clean up some of the things that were distracting or don't bring value to your episodes. Editing is your friend. It helps you to sharpen your podcast unique identity, and it gives back a huge gift to your audience, which I think you're taking lightly if you do not edit your podcast. And that is your audience's time. When you don't edit, there's a tendency to record everything, like everything, and just put it out there. And what happens to your audience is they don't get your best, they get everything. And if you've ever submitted a paper in college or university, if you've ever seen a comedian or watched a movie, been in a recording studio for music like I've done for many, many, many years, you'll realize that there is many times when someone steps in and goes, we could do that better. We really should do one more take. That line doesn't make sense. Why did you say that? Let's take that piece out and let's try that again. It's common, it's normal, it's expected. And I think the other part, the downside of not editing, is people never get better. You never listen to your own thing and go, you know, that didn't really work. That question that I asked my guest was, I asked them a terrible question and they equally gave me back a terrible answer. You know what? I'm just going to remove that piece because it doesn't detract from the conversation and it makes my guest look better. So my bad for a bad question and their answer was just terrible. Let's just take it out. No one's going to no one's going to care. No one's going to call me up and go, this sounds like you removed a question. No one's going to do that. But they will thank you for a good content that's short, concise, to the point, not inflated, not 5 minutes of content for a 1 hour show. Make it a 5-minute episode. Please don't blow up a big balloon of content. It's a lot of hot air, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So those are the 5 things that I would encourage you to think about how to keep your audience. Because again, why spend money, time, and effort going out to get new listeners to come to your show if there's no way to keep them there and keep them part of your community? Instead of your podcast being a bucket that you fill up from the bottom to the top, if you don't have a plan to keep your listeners sticking around, that bucket is more like a tube, hollow on both ends. And as people come into your world, into your podcast, they equally slide right out the other end. And you never really have a true audience for your podcast. It's very transactional. They're just kind of come and go as they wish, and you really don't know who your audience is at any given point in time. So my challenge for you is, if your podcast is like a tube, open-ended on both sides, and people are just going right through, washing right through, you need to fill up that end and turn that tube into a bucket so that you can fill it up with great content, great listeners, great community, and get these people to stick around. I would challenge you to lower the entry to your podcast, lower the bar so that more people can get into your podcast by being everywhere and offering great content and being engaging. Lower that barrier to entry, okay? Make it easy for them to find you. And then I would say rise and lift, make it higher, the barrier to exit. We're not trapping people in here, but we want them to stick around. So how do you raise that exit so it makes it harder for them to leave? Show up, be authentic, be prepared, embrace discovery, enhance yourself, and edit your podcast. That will keep people from leaving and keep them in your world. As you embark on your podcast journey with confidence, I want you to strive for brilliance. I want you to strive in your podcast to create a warm environment for your listeners and your community. Add humor if it works for your content while holding yourself to high standards. I want you to decide, this is my goal for my podcast and for me as a podcaster. Enjoy the process, and your audience will thank you by sticking around for your next episode. If you found value in this podcast, I would love to hear from you at howtopodcast.ca. Go over there, leave me a message on SpeakPipe, send me an email, whatever you got for me. I'm a carrier pigeon. I accept carrier pigeons. Anything you got for me. I'd love to hear about you, your podcast, your journey. I'm here for you. I would love to support you any way possible. Howtopodcast.ca. Keep those listeners. Don't let them sneak away from you. Build a community that sticks around. Thanks for being here, guys. Take care. Hey, thank you for sticking all the way through to the very end. It's bittersweet that the episode is over and that we're done for this episode, but you will come back and I will come back, and there's you and me, and we're one big happy family here at the How to Podcast series, far beyond being just pod pals, which is fine, but I'd much rather do life together as family here. And to that end, a reminder, as we talked earlier in other episodes as well, that we do have a meetup group, and you are invited. I would love to have you come. It's free. We do them scattered throughout our calendar, different days, different times, because we have people listening around the world, like Kuba in Warsaw, Poland. Hi, Kuba. It's amazing how we can reach the world with a podcast. So through our meetup group, what we do is we get together. It's free for you. It costs me money, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. We get together, we meet other podcasters, we talk podcasting, and it's a way to get from behind the microphone, sitting by ourselves, recording on our own, and doing community. Podcasters need community. You need to meet other podcasters. And just in a low-key, fun environment, talk podcasting. So my challenge to you in 2024 and beyond is to get into a meetup group, find other podcasters, introduce yourself, and make new friends. It's just like school all over again, grade 9. Let's meet each other and share the podcast journey. Go to howtopodcast.ca and click on all the information you'll find there around our meetups. And I'd love to have you there. Thanks for listening. Catch you on the next episode. Get out there and record your podcast. Take care.